I trudged home after a grueling day at the office, only to find that Alice wasn't around. Alice. I called as I climbed the stairs. I'm back. I'll be down in a sec, Spartan, she responded from above. It was a little joke we had. We'd met at a costume party where I'd been dressed as Spartan. We nearly bumped into each other, and I'd apologized, but she cut me off with, "You're Spartan," while poking me in the chest. I'd pointed at her chest and said, "I'm Alice," which made her laugh. It turned out her real name was actually Alice, and from that moment, we were Spartan and Alice. We'd been married for what I thought were 5 blissful years. I cracked open a beer, plopped on the couch, and tuned into the 6 o'clock news. The headlines had just ended when Alice finally descended the stairs. My jaw nearly hit the floor. She was wearing my favorite little black dress. It was mid-thigh length, and while the cleavage wasn't exactly red carpet material, it was far from modest. The backless design made it clear she wasn't wearing a bra, though the movement of her breasts gave that away too. To top it off, she was wearing the necklace I'd given her for our anniversary just a month ago. I fumbled for my phone to snap a picture, even though I wasn't quite sure why I'd need it. "Wow, didn't know we were dating," I said. "Let me freshen up and change clothes. By the way, where are we heading?" "We're not going anywhere," she replied. "David Sinclair invited me to dinner and dancing tonight. I'll probably be late, so don't wait up for me." David Sinclair, who was banned from all company parties after his reputation took a dive for messing around with too many married women. "He's not like that," Alice insisted. "He's just an uptight jerk with a jealous husband who caused all the drama." "Well, there's one jealous husband right here who's not about to let you date him," I said. "I don't belong to you," she shot back, heading for the door. "You may not belong to me, but when we exchanged our vows, we committed ourselves to each other. That means something to me. I thought it meant something to you too." "Oh, don't be so old-fashioned," she sneered. "We're in the 21st century now. Nobody believes in that stuff anymore. It's a shame you didn't tell me earlier. We could have just divorced and moved on." "Divorce?" I echoed. "What do you mean?" She laughed dismissively. As she walked out, I grabbed an old bat from the closet just as the Lexus pulled up. "Here comes David. Order yourself a pizza or something," she called out. She headed outside, and I yelled, "Alice." When she turned around, I ripped her dress off, leaving her standing in just a tight black thong and heels. She froze momentarily, then dashed back into the house. I walked towards the Lexus, tapping the bat on my palm as Sinclair sped off, tires screeching. I nodded at my neighbors, who were clearly enjoying Alice's impromptu show, and went back inside to return the bat to the closet. I grabbed a fresh beer, since the first one was already warm, and settled back on the couch, waiting for the inevitable drama. It didn't take long. Alice stormed downstairs, wrapped in a robe and seething with anger. Her tirade was a mix of fury and frustration that I could barely follow. I heard expletives that I didn't even know were in her vocabulary. I just sat there until she ran out of steam. "What were you thinking?" I asked, bewildered. "What were you hoping for?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Our lives have gotten so monotonous that we never have any fun anymore. Why am I only hearing about this now? And the last few times I tried to change things up, you were either too busy, uninterested, or it was just gross. Even if you can justify cheating, why humiliate me like this?" "I didn't want to lie," she explained. "I thought if I told you, it wouldn't count as cheating." "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," I said. "Sleeping with someone else without my consent is definitely cheating." "Maybe you'd allow it," she suggested, looking at me with false hope. "You've really lost your mind," I said, feeling the rage bubble up. "I need to get out of here before I do something we'll both regret." I snatched the keys and bolted before she could even get up from her seat. I did what any self-respecting man would do in my shoes. I went to my favorite bar to drown my sorrows. "What's wrong, Michael?" Ben asked, sliding another bottle my way. "You look like you lost your best friend." "Maybe you're not too far off," I replied. I came home to find Alice dressed to the nines, telling me she was going out with David Sinclair from work and that I shouldn't wait up. "Of course you told her no," Ben said. "Of course I did. What kind of fool do you think I am?" I almost went off on him when he smirked and said, "Just messing with you, dude." So what happened next? Well, she gave me the usual spiel about not owning her and how loyalty is outdated. "I guess you didn't buy it." "Ding, ding, ding," I said. "You got it right." At that moment, Sinclair's car pulled up, and Alice headed for the door. I grabbed a bat from the closet and, following her outside, tore off her dress right there in the street. She stood frozen for a moment, then realized all the neighbors were watching her in just a thong and scampered back into the house. I walked to the car, still holding the bat, and watched as Sinclair sped away. "Looks like a win for you," Ben said. "So, what's bringing you here tonight?" The victory was short-lived. I was sipping my beer when Alice reappeared downstairs, pouting like a bear with a sore head. As she calmed down, she started ranting about our routine sex life and claimed that if she had my permission, it wouldn't be cheating. Ben was at a loss for words. I knew I needed to get out of there, so here I am. Ben cracked open a few more cold bottles, and we clinked glasses and drank. After a couple more drinks, I decided to call it a night before I risked driving under the influence. "Good night and good luck, Michael," Ben said. "Thanks, Ben. I think I'm going to need it." When I got back home, Alice was already in bed. I went through my usual evening routine, slipped into my pajamas, and crawled into bed with my back turned to her. As I drifted off, I thought I heard her quietly sobbing, but I chose to ignore it. The next morning, Alice was up early, making breakfast. Our meal was eerily quiet, and once we finished cleaning up, Alice started up again. "Michael, why can't you see that times have changed? No one expects to stay with just one person for their entire life anymore." "Well, I don't think I'm alone in this," I replied. As for staying with one person for life, neither of us was a virgin. We dated others before we met. You know that's not what I mean. We were just kids back then, barely understanding anything. Now we have more experience and more to compare. "I don't need to compare anything," I said. "I did a lot of comparing before I asked you to marry me. I chose you because I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. When you said yes, I thought you felt the same way. Did you lie?" "No, but what? Have you changed your mind? If so, maybe we should just get a divorce." "I don't want a divorce." "Well, you can't have it both ways. If you don't want a divorce, you'll need to forget about this nonsense." Alice lowered her gaze and said, "I don't want a divorce." "Then it's decided," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Despite Alice's claims that she had given up on seeing other men, I found it hard to believe. I was on edge every time she was late or didn't call when she said she would. The tension between us was palpable, and it even affected our intimacy. Everything felt more cautious and less passionate. Finally, I lost my composure. "Alice, I want a divorce." She looked shocked. "But I thought we were okay." "Really? Do you think everything's fine? Do you believe we're anywhere near where we used to be, when things were good?" She lowered her eyes and shook her head. Telling my parents was the hardest part. They couldn't grasp why we couldn't make it work. When my father-in-law cornered me one day, I showed him a photo of Alice half-dressed, and he backed off. We faced a lot of questions from the family. I let the wine flow to shield Alice from embarrassment, but ultimately, I had to show everyone the photo and explain what she had been up to. Alice's family came down hard on her, and she came to me looking for sympathy. "Michael, Is there really nothing I can do to change your mind about the divorce? I put my hand to my chin and thought for a moment. I came up with an idea that I was sure she wouldn't like. Okay, Alice, I won't stop the divorce, but I'll postpone it on one condition. Her mood lifted immediately. Anything, Michael? Be careful when you say anything. It's a lot. I'm not worried, she said. I'm sure you won't go crazy. So, what's the condition? She asked eagerly. I'll let you date other men as long as I can date other women. I was pretty sure I saw a grin flash across her face before she masked it with a sickly sweet smile. Of course, Michael, that's fair. What a piece of work. I was convinced she hadn't expected me to find another woman. There's one more thing, I said. What? You can't start dating until I've had a chance to find someone myself. She seemed thrilled, probably thinking she already had someone in mind and was worried I might not find anyone. I decided to give her a little incentive. If I can't find a date within 2 weeks, you can go ahead with your plans. This brought one of the brightest smiles I'd seen from her in weeks. She threw her arms around my neck and kissed me. That's great, Michael. Thank you. You'll see, this will be just what our marriage needs. Yes, it might just revive it, or flush it down the drain. A few days later, Alice was taken aback when I told her I had a date and suggested we go on a double date the next day. She probably thought I was bluffing and that she'd be out on a date while I stayed home alone. Without Alice knowing, I had lined up a date I hoped would put an end to this madness once and for all. On Monday, I took a long lunch to buy new clothes and left them in the car. On Friday, I left work early to get my hair done and make sure I was home before Alice. I snuck into the guest room with my new outfit and got ready in the shower. When I heard the garage door open, I finished shaving, brushing my teeth, and went to the bedroom to complete my look. Alice seemed surprised when I emerged from the guest room in a new outfit and with a fresh hairstyle, but she quickly regained her composure. David will pick me up at 6:30. Fine. We have a reservation with Olivia at 7 o'clock. The table is in my name in case you get there before us, I said as I walked out the door. What Alice didn't know was that we had a new hire at work, Isabel Ramirez. Isabel was a stunning redhead who turned heads everywhere she went. She was completely professional, never feeding office gossip. We'd struck up a casual friendship, and though she flirted with me from time to time, I would always politely show her my wedding ring. So, when I asked her out for drinks after work, she was intrigued. I arrived at the bar before she did and was staring into my glass when she walked in. So, Michael, what's got the last Boy Scout of America out of his shell? She asked with a laugh. One look at my forlorn expression quickly sobered her. Oh, Michael, I'm so sorry, she said, placing a warm hand on mine. I didn't mean to tease you. You look like you've lost your best friend. My eyes began to well up, and I turned away. Isabel put her arm around my shoulders and guided me to a table. I took a sip of my drink while she sat patiently, giving me the space I needed to gather my thoughts and muster the courage to tell her my story. Well, she said, once I'd finished, there's only one thing we can do. We? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, we, she confirmed. I'll be your date. I laughed for the first time since Alice dropped this bombshell of an idea. Why are you laughing? I'm serious, she insisted. I looked into her eyes, half expecting a gotcha moment, but her sincerity was clear. Why me? I know you don't date married men, hell, you barely even flirt with single men. If the guys at the office thought they had a chance with you, there'd be a line around the block. I'm not just looking for a date, she said. Like you said, I can date anyone I want. But I really like you. Maybe it's because you don't always undress me with your eyes. Not that you don't sometimes, it'd be weird if you didn't. But you always treat me with respect. When we talk, you actually listen and support my ideas when others dismiss them just because they come from me. More importantly, I like you, and I'm angry at your wife for treating you so poorly. So, are we on a date or not? I might not have been born yesterday, but I wasn't born last night either. You're in. I finished off the rest of my drink and walked Isabel to her car. She gave me her number, shared a friendly hug, and drove off. I had a feeling my life was about to get a lot more interesting. When I pulled up to Isabel's place, I barely had time to get out and open her door before she reached the car. She was a bit taller than Alice but still shorter than me. Her dress, emerald green and tight, fell just below the knee, with a daring slit up the left side almost to her thigh. Her wavy red hair cascaded down to her mid-waist, and the dress showed more cleavage than I'd ever seen on Alice. As I helped her into the car, she almost slipped, giving me a brief but tantalizing glimpse of her creamy white thigh before she adjusted her dress, flashing me a bright smile. "We'll have plenty of time for that later," she said, her voice a sultry purr. I had to compose myself before driving, feeling a bit awkward from her laugh and touch. As if that wasn't enough, she began rubbing my thigh. Luckily, we arrived at the restaurant before things got too far, and I managed to regain control as we walked in. Alice and David were already there. I'd seen David a few times before, and his appearance that evening made no more impression on me than usual. Alice, on the other hand, was furious. I don't think I've ever seen her so worked up. David didn't stand up, so I didn't offer my hand, merely nodding at Alice while helping Isabel into her seat. Alice was clearly shocked to see me with such an attractive date. I think she was going to make a snide comment but thought better of it. David, however, couldn't take his eyes off Isabel's cleavage. Alice had to elbow him to keep his gaze from wandering. Dinner started off awkwardly but soon felt like just another night out with two normal couples, rather than husband and wife with different partners. Afterward, we went to a club to drink and dance. The fast dances were uneventful, but during the slow songs, Isabel pressed herself against me, and I could feel Alice's glare piercing through me. Alice was practically grinding on David, trying to make a scene. She attracted quite a bit of attention, but she seemed oblivious to it, lost in her own world. When David's hand slipped under her dress to caress her breasts, I felt a wave of embarrassment and quickly led Isabel back to our table. We watched Alice and David put on their show until the manager approached them and asked them to leave. Alice dashed to the table in tears, grabbed her coat, and left with David following closely behind. "Well, you certainly know how to have a good time with a girl," Isabel said, giggling. I could only laugh and we returned to the dance floor. When we were ready to leave, I approached the manager. "I'd like to apologize for our companions," I said. "Don't worry about it," he replied. "No complaints here." "I understand. Please come again." I took Isabel to her apartment and walked her to the door. As I leaned in for a friendly goodnight kiss, she surprised me by pulling me close for a passionate kiss. Isabel asked, "Would you like to come in for a nightcap?" There was a certain glint in her eye that hinted she had more on her mind than just a drink, but who was I to argue? The glass was quickly forgotten as soon as the door closed behind us. She pushed me onto the sofa and straddled my lap, the slit in her dress widening to give me an enticing view. With deliberate slowness, she unbuttoned the top of her dress, letting it fall to her waist and revealing her firm, captivating breasts. Before I knew it, she slid to the floor and began unbuttoning my trousers. Her movements were agonizingly slow, and I found myself struggling to keep my composure. She settled back onto me, and I could feel her warmth pressing against me. In that moment, it struck me that, despite Alice's complaints about our sex life being stale, she had never allowed me such intimate positions. Alice always said it was humiliating. Clearly, Isabel didn't share that view. After a while, I rolled over beside her, and she nestled against me, resting her head on my shoulder. As we lay there, a nervous thought crossed my mind. "Isabel, in all the excitement, I had forgotten to use a condom. "It's okay," she reassured me, sensing my anxiety. "I'm on the pill." I cupped her chin, lifted her face to mine, and kissed her tenderly, our tongues meeting in a gentle dance. I lost track of time as we made love, but it felt like mere moments before we drifted into a blissful sleep. Lying there, I couldn't help but think about Alice's claim that our sex life was monotonous. If anything, my night with Isabel had shown me it wasn't because of me. The next morning, we showered separately. While Isabel finished up, I made breakfast. When she saw the spread, she commented, "Wow, you're not just a great lover, you're also a cook. I could get used to having you around." As we sat down to eat, I said, "Isabel, I really like you, and last night was the best sex I've ever had. But I need to sort out my marriage first. Even if we do get divorced, I'm not sure how soon I'll be ready for another relationship." "Don't worry, Michael," she said, "I was just teasing you. I like you too, and if things work out, I could definitely see us together. But you're right, first, you need to settle things with your wife." After breakfast, we chatted about trivial things until I decided it was time to head home and see if anything could be salvaged from my marriage. When I walked in, I found Alice sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. Seeing my contented expression made her burst into tears. I took a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "So, how was your night with David?" "Oh, Michael," she sobbed, "it was terrible. All I could think about was you and Isabel. She's so beautiful, and I know I can't compete with her." "You wouldn't have to worry about competition if you hadn't started this mess," I said. Alice couldn't meet my gaze but nodded in agreement. "I think you'd feel less regret if it was just me and David left alone at home." She looked up, her eyes filled with tears, then nodded again. "I just don't know what to do. Part of me wants to kick you out and start over with someone new." Alice was openly sobbing now, clearly tormented by the situation. "But then I look at you and see the person I married, the one I fell in love with. I don't see an evil woman, just a confused girl. I hope there's a way back for us." Alice's hope was evident in her tear-filled eyes. "I'm going to change and go out for a while. When I return, we'll talk again. Please don't make me move out, Michael. How can we be together if we're apart? I need you now more than ever." "You don't understand," I said. "It's not just about us getting back together. Maybe you should have considered how much you needed me before starting this." I went upstairs to our bedroom, leaving Alice at the table. When I came back down, Alice was still sitting there, watching me with hopeful eyes. I shook my head sadly and walked out of the house. I know it sounds cold, but I needed Alice to feel the fragility of our marriage. I walked down to the Charles River and sat on a bench, watching the rowers and sailboats. I felt a pang of sadness as I wondered if I'd ever have children with Alice. I don't know how long I sat there, but as the sun began to set and the chill set in, I took a deep breath and trudged back home. When I entered the house, Alice was still at the table. She looked up at me with hope, but I simply shook my head, went up to my room, and locked the door. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, covering my eyes with my hand. I don't know how long I lay there before I heard a soft knock and a whisper, "Michael." I didn't answer, and after a second knock, I heard her footsteps retreating to the guest room. After making sure she had gone to bed, I quickly showered and fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I went downstairs to find Alice had prepared a large breakfast. Surprisingly, I had a good appetite, though Alice only picked at her food. "Michael," she said, "do you think we could try seeing a psychologist?" I considered the idea. I didn't know much about counseling and wondered if they'd try to get me to agree with Alice's perspective. If that was the case, I could always leave. But I wanted to work things out. From my night with Isabel, I'd learned that our sex life had become mundane. Did I really want to go back to that? Despite my anger at Alice for never addressing her issues with me directly, I decided I still had enough love for her. I wasn't ready to give up without a fight. "Okay, Alice, let's get something straight," I said. She almost jumped out of her chair. "I don't want a counselor whose goal is to save our marriage. Whether it can be saved or not is irrelevant. I won't tolerate any hidden agendas." I could tell she was disappointed. She must have been hoping for some New Age therapist who would endorse her "times have changed" philosophy, but she had no choice but to agree. The consultation turned out to be surprisingly effective. Alice had to face how her refusal to work with me was contributing to her dissatisfaction with our sex life, and I realized I needed to be more assertive. We discussed what we wanted, needed, and expected from our intimacy. Although counseling helped us address many issues, I remained focused on her betrayal, even if I didn't let it dominate our interactions. Alice, on her part, couldn't get past her insecurities about Isabel. Despite my assurances that, although I had some feelings for Isabel, I was not in love with her and that our date was merely a response to the situation, Alice simply didn't accept it. In the end, we decided to part ways amicably. Once the divorce was finalized, I took time to reflect on my life. I didn't immediately reach out to Isabel. Instead, I booked a stay at a bed and breakfast on the Mina coast. The weather was unpredictable, mirroring my mood, but I needed to relax and contemplate my next steps. When I returned, I called Isabel. We went to dinner, and though we ended up in bed together, it was more for comfort than passion. The next morning, as we lay in bed, she asked, "Penny for your thoughts, Michael?" I replied, "I was thinking how easy it would be to pick you up and ask you to stay with me forever. But I know that the easy way isn't always the best." She smiled slyly and said, "Get your mind out of the gutter. I don't just mean sex, you pervert. I really like you, and I know I could easily fall in love with you, but I'm concerned it might be unfair to both of us since my divorce is still fresh. I think it's better if we both see other people for a while, as well as each other. I can't guarantee how long this will last, and I won't ask you to wait for me." I wanted to argue, but I knew she was right. We got out of bed, used the bathroom, showered separately, and had a quiet breakfast. I was tempted to ignore our agreement and pursue a relationship with Isabel, and I think she might have been tempted too, but I was determined. After we finished cleaning up, she walked me to the door, and we hugged, tears in our eyes. "I think this is goodbye," she said. "No, I don't agree," I replied. "Why don't we meet for dinner in 2 weeks, just to check in on how things are going?" "Okay," she agreed, kissed me on the cheek, and led me out the door. The sound of the door closing felt like a prison door, and I wasn't sure if I'd made the worst mistake of my life. I spent the rest of the week questioning my sanity. On Friday, I decided to join some friends for dinner and drinks. We sat in a corner booth at the back of the restaurant, with me facing the door. As we were finishing dessert, I saw her walk in. Isabel was with a tall, handsome guy. Who was I kidding? Of course, he was tall and handsome. I was torn about whether to say hello, but I decided against it, respecting our breakup. I was disappointed at how quickly she seemed to have moved on. I guess you could call me a coward because I waited until she went to the restroom before leaving some cash on the table and saying a quick goodbye to my friends. I was angry with her for not waiting longer to start dating again and even angrier with myself. It was something we both agreed on. One thing was certain, I needed to get back into the dating scene. I flatter myself that I'm a pretty good catch, and I had no problem arranging a date for the following Friday. Her name was Heather Price. She worked as a secretary for one of my clients, and we'd had some flirtatious exchanges in the past. She knew I was married, but she readily agreed once I mentioned my divorce. Heather had always seemed attractive in a professional sense, but I was surprised by how stunning she looked when she opened the door. "I think I'm pretty well prepared," she said. "That's an understatement," I replied, noticing her readiness. "Just let me put on my cloak," she said. I helped her with it, and we went out. Dinner was filled with the usual first date conversation, though we discussed my divorce. Heather was shocked by Alice's actions. Over coffee and dessert, I decided to be upfront. Heather, I don't want to deceive you. Before my divorce was finalized, I was involved with someone, and after my divorce, things got serious. We both agreed to see other people for a while to avoid rushing into anything. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as a placeholder. I'm open to whatever happens. Her response was reassuring. Michael, this is just our first date. I'm not expecting any commitment. I appreciate your honesty. Let's just see where things go. With that awkwardness behind us, we had a pleasant evening, ending with a warm kiss and plans for the following Saturday. Meanwhile, I had a dinner planned with Isabel and was unsure of how it would go. When she arrived, she was as beautiful as ever. During dinner, she suddenly became serious after our orders were placed. You know, I saw you, she said. I raised my eyebrows, curious. I saw you with your friends the other night. I was going to come over and say hello, but when I came out of the restroom, you were already gone. I felt a little embarrassed. I know we agreed to see other people, but seeing you with someone else so soon made me a bit jealous. It's silly, I know. Michael, you had no reason to be jealous, she continued. Ethan is an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. When he called, I took the opportunity to have dinner with him. It wasn't anything significant. No need to apologize. If there was any upset, it was all in my head. In fact, it motivated me to finally get off my butt and ask someone out. We had dinner last week. Her eyebrows raised at that. Should I be feeling jealous? She asked, a playful smile on her face. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, I replied. We've got another date planned for tomorrow night. We both agree there's no commitment here, just two people enjoying each other's company. That's nice, she said, her smile tinged with wistfulness. You deserve to have a good time. Our awkward conversation was cut short as our dinners arrived, shifting our chat to lighter subjects. Would you like to go dancing? I asked, opening the car door for her. No, I think it would be better if you just took me home, she replied. The drive was quiet. She stared out the window, lost in thought. We reached her door, shared a kiss that was perhaps a bit more intense than we intended, and gently separated. Please stay in touch, Michael, she said. I will, I assured her. Good night, Isabel, I said, quickly retreating to my car before attempting to get her inside. My date with Heather went well. Our goodbye kiss was more passionate, and we even did a bit of petting, but we decided to break things off before it went too far. Even though I spoke with Isabel every week or so, we never actually met up. I'm not sure if we were avoiding each other subconsciously or if it was just fate. I saw Heather a few more times. We ended up in bed and had fun, but there was no real spark. After our third night together, Heather dropped a bombshell. Michael, I think this should be the last time, she said. What? I thought everything was fine. Well, it might have been too fine, she replied, sounding perplexed. Michael, when we started, we agreed there'd be no commitment. I made it clear I wasn't looking for anything serious, and I didn't have any feelings then, but now I'm starting to develop feelings for you. If we keep going, I think we might head down a path I'm not ready for. I'd rather end this now before the feelings deepen and cause more pain later. I hope that makes sense. In a way, it did. It hurt, but I knew I'd get through it. I dressed, kissed her forehead, and made my way to the door. Good night, Heather. Goodbye, Michael, she said, her sad smile and teary eyes telling their own story. After closing the door, I pondered my next move. I started dating a string of women. Some were one-night stands, others were short-lived relationships, but none of them were serious. Eventually, I figured out what was missing and decided to make a call. "Hello?" she answered. "Isabel, it's Michael," I said, forgetting she had caller ID. "Isabel, I don't know where you are right now, but I'm done with casual rebounds. I'm ready to settle down if you'll have me. I want to come home." There was a pause on the other end, and I began to worry I'd missed my chance. "How soon can you come?" Alice had stayed in town, living a solitary life with her cats, and she certainly wasn't looking for work in a Mexican brothel. I wasn't truly serious about her, but I saw Heather a few more times. We ended up in bed again, and while it was fun, the spark just wasn't there. After our third night together, Heather dropped the same bombshell on me again. "Michael, I think this should be the last time." "What?" "I thought we were fine," I protested. "Maybe too fine," she said, her words confusing me. "Michael, we agreed on no commitment. I didn't have any feelings at the start, but now I'm developing them. If we keep this up, we might end up in a place I'm not ready for. I'd rather end things now before the feelings get too deep and hurt more later." I hope this makes sense. It did, in a strange way. It hurt, but I would move on. I got dressed, kissed her forehead, and headed to the door. "Good night, Heather." "Goodbye, Michael," she replied, her sad smile and teary eyes reflecting her own pain. I closed the door and thought about my next move. Some of my dating experiences were one-night stands, others were brief relationships, but none of them turned serious. Eventually, I realized what was truly missing in my life and decided to pick up the phone. "Hello?" she answered. "Isabel, it's Michael," I said, completely forgetting she had caller ID. "Isabel, I don't know what's going on with you, but I'm done with endless rebounds. I've had more ups and downs than a pinball machine, and I'm ready for something more. If you're still open to it, I want to come home." There was a pause on the other end, and I feared I might have missed my chance. "How soon can you come?" she finally asked. Alice hadn't left town in disgrace. She lived a solitary life surrounded by her cats and certainly wasn't seeking work in a Mexican brothel. Though I wasn't particularly curious, mutual friends mentioned she was dating, but no one serious seemed to be in the picture. Isabel wanted to invite Alice to our wedding. Although I had reservations, I didn't object. Alice declined the invitation but sent a lovely gift instead. I was surprised when Isabel developed a casual friendship with Alice, meeting occasionally for coffee or shopping. It didn't bother me, although it was certainly unusual. About 6 months after we got married, I came home to find Isabel dressed up and ready to go out. "Oh, here we go again," I thought. But fortunately, my concerns were misplaced. "Go change," she said. "We're meeting Alice at Olivia's for dinner." "Look, I know you two have become pretty close, but don't you think this is a bit much?" I asked. "Don't worry, dear. There's a method to my madness," she replied. I knew better than to argue when she had her mind set on something, so I shrugged and went to change. When we arrived, Alice was already there, and the situation was as awkward as could be. Isabel and Alice exchanged cheek kisses, as women do, while I just stood there, feeling out of place. Neither of us seemed to know what to do. Alice broke the silence. "Michael, good to see you. You look great." "Thanks, Alice. You look good too." We were spared further awkwardness as we were shown to our table. Isabel paused to speak with the man at the counter. "What's this all about?" I asked when she rejoined us. "Don't worry about it, honey," she said. "Every husband knows that when his wife says nothing, it usually means something, and he should be concerned." But there was nothing I could do except go along with it and hope for the best. Alice sat to my right, with Isabel opposite her. Before we could even order drinks, the owner came over with Ethan. Isabel greeted him warmly, gave him a hug, and seated him on my left, directly across from Alice. It became clear that Isabel's plan was unfolding. While my worst fears hadn't come true, the evening still had the potential for disaster. Fortunately, Alice and Ethan hit it off, and the conversation flowed smoothly throughout dinner. By all accounts, we were like four old friends. Before long, it was time to leave. Ethan and I split the bill, and as Isabel and I were heading out, Alice and Ethan decided to extend their evening at the restaurant bar. Isabel was so self-assured, but I couldn't be angry. Although it might not last, they clearly had a good start. We kept up cordial, if somewhat distant, relationships with Alice and Ethan. We rarely saw each other as couples but often met in group settings. Apparently, their relationship was stable, and Alice no longer seemed to need to spice things up. We wished them all the best. Isabel and I couldn't be happier. Though, I must admit, the baby's kicks at night certainly keep her awake.